4 interviews. And then when we send them the recording, and I'm sorry, when we send the link, the person just
Yeah,
double clicking the link and we are on it. So I'm not
yeah,
sure.
I don't know.
All right, Dr. Gleeson, thank you very much, man.
Yeah,
Uh,
again, call me Patrick. I don't need the doctor. I'll
well,
tell you a
you
story. I tell you a story about that, the doctor, if we have time.
I give yeah, give me 1 minute. Let me get my uh okay, I'm not going to call you. Uh
You call me Patrick.
okay, got you. Good afternoon, uh,
Hi.
Patrick Gleeson. My name is Claudio. I'm calling you from DC. Let's make a formal introduction for our listeners. From the studios in Fairfax City, we are very humble and grateful that Patrick Gleeson accepted our invitation to our show. Patrick Gleeson is an American musician, synthesizer pioneer, composer, and producer. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad we're here.
I'm glad, same here. So, um, I will ask you some questions, but I call it more than a conversation about music and soundtrack and jazz, a little bit more than an interview. And you can feel
Yeah,
free to ask me questions as well.
sure.
Christian and I, with some friends, when the pandemic, we decided some months ago to open one online radio station, and then I opened another one, and I opened a third one, and now I'm putting together a fourth one, and we like the stuff.
Oh,
Things for me, music is very important to me. I grew up in a family where my dad did have a lot of music, so although I don't play any instrument, I don't know how to read music at all. I just like listen
yeah.
to music, buy a lot in all different areas, and we decided it was a good way to do this stuff. So, Doc, keep on calling you Dr. Cliff.
Well,
I
let's stop right there and let me explain about the doctor, okay?
okay, gotcha.
I do have a doctor's degree. I got a PhD in 18th century English literature, nothing to do
Right.
with music. When I was teaching, I taught for 8 years.
Yeah.
When I was teaching, I never used the doctorate. It was considered, it was like reverse snobbery. At Harvard, all the doctors are called Mr. So by God, we're going to call ourselves Mr. as well. So I never used the doctor when I was teaching. When I got into Herbie Hancock's band in 1971 and we went out on the road, he would always introduce both me and Eddie Henderson, the trumpet player, as Dr. Henderson and Dr. Gleeson. I never asked Herbie why that was, but after having been on the road for a while, I understood. Herbie's a very politic, genial, strategic guy. What he was telling the audience without having to say so is, this is just to remind you, we're not 6 Negroes and a hippie parading around the country. We're persons of substance. Our trumpet player has got a medical degree and the synthesizer player has a PhD. So please understand, when you see a jazz band, these are just not some random guys that got together. This is something valid and important. So that's how I got the doctorate. Once I got out of the band, I tried to drop the doctorate. People wouldn't recognize that I was Patrick Gleeson, the synthesizer player, until I told him, yes, I am. He said, but you're not Dr. Gleeson. No, yes, I'm also Dr. Gleeson. But today, let's just Claudio and Patrick will do. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I have very respect for you. I mean, I'm like yourself. I'm well educated myself, and I got lucky on the way as well. No PhD, but I have done well. And
Yeah.
so this has been a weird year for everybody, Patrick, with the pandemic and not be able to tour. And I know you have a trio too. How it is affecting your creativity? Still, you compose music, you write music as well.
Oh yes. Yeah, I see myself as equally a composer and a performer.
Yeah.
And so during the pandemic, I've started a quadraphonic album, a solo album. I'm doing it with a brilliant guy who has actually developed special software to be able to enable persons to take a vinyl quadraphonic album, put it on a stereo turntable, and then use his special hardware to connect to two more speakers, and they can listen to quadraphonic music on a stereo turntable.
Oh
So
my God, man.
yeah, no, he's a very, very, very bright guy. So early in his life, he was a C-suite member of a major corporation and left because it wasn't what he was interested in, but he left with a lot of money. So now the rest of his life, he's doing what he wants. And one of the things he's doing is producing quadraphonic music. His first album was Suzanne Ciani's brilliant album, and now he's doing mine. So that's what I've been doing during the pandemic, is this quadraphonic album.
Man, we'll talk more about that because I would be very interested in talking to him as well.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a computer engineer, right?
Mhm.
So technology is very important to me, but in many ways, music is my passion, right? So computer science pays the bills, but music is what I really like to stuff.
Yeah.
Give me a lot of satisfaction. So were you born like in a musical family, and when you
Not at
started playing the
all,
piano?
no, my dad had a small business, a small loan company in Seattle. My mom was was a housekeeper, housewife, and they were both Irish immigrants. So there was no arts background there at all. But I don't know what happened, but I started taking piano lessons when I was 6. By the time I was in the 3rd grade, so I'd be about 9, I'd fallen in love with jazz. I mean, it was something I really responded to deeply. And my parents were, to a degree, encouraging. So I wanted to buy Mary Lou Williams, a great African-American woman jazz pianist. I wanted to buy her little series of books uh, for young people. So by the 3rd grade, I was playing out of Mary Lou Williams songbooks and so forth. Started going to jazz concerts and clubs when I was, I guess, 14 or 15. We would go, my best friend and I would go down and we would go to one of these, they were called race clubs, if you can believe that, in Seattle. We'd go down to one of these quote race clubs, and they would get to know us, so we'd have to stand around for a couple of weeks before they would let us in sometimes. Then they got to know us and would let us in, but they'd say, now you guys can go in, but you don't talk to anybody. You sit down, and above all, don't order a drink. so we would go to these clubs, and I got to know a lot of the jazz musicians in Seattle through that. But I just, it just hit me. It was a very, I don't know what to say, life-fulfilling art form.
And then you continue taking, I read on your kind of biography that you continue with the classic
Yes.
classes, but kind of was a conflict of interest between the teacher. You wanted to learn jazz. She told you, no, forget about jazz, do the classical.
Yeah.
Your parents say, well, you one or the other, and
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Well, I think my parents were that was a little bit of a reach for me to start taking jazz piano. I don't know that it was the race. The teacher I would have had was African American. I think it was also that they were concerned about the fact that this was going to divert my attention away from doing what they wanted me to do, which was to become a medical doctor. Doesn't every immigrant parent want their child to become a medical doctor?
Oh,
You
know, you asked me the question.
Yeah.
You want me to answer?
Yeah.
So I'm an immigrant, like your parents, right? So I'm the first generation immigrant. I came from Santiago, Chile, right?
Mhm.
From South America, and my son was born here in Boston when I was going to school and so forth. So it's kind of the role of the parents, right, is to help them accomplish their dream
Yes.
instead of imposing dreams on them.
But
I, I
that's
have I have 3 master degrees from Harvard, so I have done well in my life. And I think in my case I was a very poor student, believe it or not, before when I was growing in South America. And then when I came here, I got lucky along the way. I was able to come here. I was very poor. I worked very hard. I went step by step, and I did have done well from myself and from my family. But it needs to come from you. It doesn't need to come from the parents, right?
right. That's right.
That, but I agree with, because there's people, that bringing of different people is different, and so on. I understand, but it needs to come from within, right? So if my son wanna be, a bomb, right, I would say no, because the schooling is important in life, right? Without college degree, it's very difficult to make it, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say, well, law is better than engineering or engineering is better than medical. You
Yeah.
need to do what you like it, do 2, 3 degrees, whatever you like,
Right.
and find your way in the world, whatever that means to you, not to me, right?
Yes.
Eventually you will go on your own, and you need to do well in life. So work hard, be a decent person, try people well, don't discriminate, try to do the right thing in life.
Yeah.
Those are, in my opinion, Claudius have been on the role of the parents. So
Yes. But you're better educated and culturally more sophisticated person than my parents were.
I got
Remember,
lucky on the way, doctor.
yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Patrick, everybody's smart or everybody's an idiot.
yeah.
It's the person, the perseverance, the consistency, and the hard work, and
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's sharp.
But my parents, I think, were worried that, if I were to become a musician, that I would never be able to have a middle class income and be a
Right.
person.
Yeah.
So that was their worry, and it was a kind of a point of contention between me and my parents for a long time. And one time, by this time I'm like 40 years old or something. And I'm sitting at the breakfast table with my mother. I'm visiting them in Seattle. My mother looks up and she says, your father tells me that you make more money than he does. I looked at my mother. I said, well, I don't know, Mom. I don't know how much Dad makes, but it's possible. And she says, she sort of starts fingering her silverware nervously. She said, well, that's what he says. So from that point on, there was no problem with my being a musician.
Gotcha. Yeah, of course, obviously the parents, I want my son to do better than I
Yeah.
did. And so,
Yeah.
because for me, Patrick, when I came here, I was very poor, right? So I got lucky on the way. People helped me, and I worked my tail off, right, to be where I
Yeah.
am. But of course, you want the kids, the next generation, to be better, right?
Yes.
And so at the time you were read, so your piano teacher said, no, piano is the only way. I mean, classical music is the only way to make it. Forget about Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and all the nonsense. No,
Yeah.
not really, but
Yeah.
this is the way. I'm not teaching you jazz. I'm teaching
Yeah.
you that,
Right.
right? So and your parents say, well, jazz. I mean, classical is the only way. So either you take it, you leave it, right?
And I left it. It made me so discouraged that I quit playing the piano. I quit studying for, 15 years.
15 years or so, right? For where, right?
Yeah. So, but then the 60s came along, and everything that happened in the 60s, people are going a little bit crazy in this country, and now I'm finding myself attracted to music again. And I remember one night I was sitting in my living room listening to Bartók's first violin concerto, and it just struck me like a bolt of lightning. My God, what am I doing teaching English literature? This is the only thing I want to do in life, is to make music. So from that point on, I transitioned back to being a full-time musician. And again, I was very lucky because it happened at a time when it was easy or easier to do that. I mean, I just happened to be in the town where the first operative analog synthesizer had been built. I mean, it was actually in Oakland, Don Buchla's, and I was able to get time on the Buchla and learn the synthesizer on the Buchla. And a year later, I had quit teaching and was making a living doing, local ads and PBS scores for PBS shows, which don't pay very much money. And then I started doing overdubs for Jefferson Airplane and let's see who else. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of all. There were about 5 or 6 groups I worked for, and then I ran into a producer, David Rubinson, and David was going to take over and become Herbie's producer. As it happened, I'd been putting on Bitches Brew, which was a great transitional album of Miles Davis that really took us from one era of jazz to the next. I'd been putting Bitches Brew on my 16-track recorder at night after the last session. I had a little recording studio by that time, and I would overdub synths. So I said to David, I can do this. I can play this music. So David understandably was a little skeptical. I mean, here's a guy who's never recorded on a real record, and he wants to join Herbie Hancock. So David told Herbie, he said, no, look, this guy isn't really a musician. He knows a lot about the synthesizer. Why don't you go over to his studio and he can set the synthesizer up for you and you can play it. So Herbie came over and I had everything all set up and my engineer was there and I was out in the studio with the synth and Herbie came out with me. And so we started listening to the first cut of his album Crossings. He said, we're in about 15 seconds. He said, no, I hear something there. I said, okay. So I start patching my Moog 3, the big modular Moog, and I'm going as fast as I can. I'm thinking this guy's going to be impatient with this process and he's going to leave and this is going to be the end of the opportunity. So I was just really going as fast as I could. I finished the patch and I turned to Herbie and I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, did you record it? I said, well, no, you're going to record it. He said, you're doing fine. You just record it. And so I recorded it. So we went on that way. And every time I asked him to play it, he said, no, you do it. You're doing fine. After about an hour, he said, you know what? I have some shopping to do. Why don't you just keep going and I'll come back later. So he didn't come back until the next afternoon. I worked all the rest of that day, all through the night and all through the next morning until by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd overdubbed half the album. And when he came back, that was it. And I didn't know, I mean, I knew he liked it, but I didn't know how much he liked it. And then we finished the album and then about, 2 or 3 months later, I got a phone call and some secretary of David said, Herbie would like to speak to you. So Herbie got on the phone. He said, Pat, he said, how would you like to join the band?
Wow.
What? So that was how my career started.
Tell the story about, I read somewhere that when you started, your dad lent you 20 grand to buy
Oh yeah.
Which is 20 grand at the time. Not right now, it's a lot of money. Back then.
Oh yeah, but it would be like, I would say, I mean, remember this is like the 60s. So this would be probably like $100,000 to $150,000 in today's.
So you went to your dad, I'm sort of done with teaching. Music is my calling.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, let me give it a try. Something like that, right?
Yeah, he was suspicious. But he said, I'll tell you what, I won't lend you the money. I'll give you the money. So because that way he knew if I failed, if I couldn't pay him back, that it wouldn't be a failure. It would just, so if he'd given me the money, then there was no obligation and hence no possibility of my failing. I think he wanted to make sure that this didn't become a problem between the two of us. So he lent me the money, and that was the money I used to start Different Fur, the studio, which, by the way, is still going today.
Yeah, I will ask you about that stuff too. So you began doing, so you left teaching and you left academia, you start doing work for some people, you began doing your career, you went to your dad and said, well, I've been doing this for 2 years. I'm earning an income. I'm not starting from zero.
Yeah.
Let me show you who I'm working, play. The dad said, okay, here's the money. Don't screw up.
Yeah.
And then you began doing well for yourself, right? So
yeah, that's right.
And then you ever pay the money back, or what?
Oh no, he didn't. I mean, it was a gift.
But it was a psychological gift, right?
Huh?
In a way that he gave you the money, but psychologically, I need to make it happen. There's no way around, right? No.
Yeah, my way of paying him back was to succeed.
To succeed, exactly. That's the correct word. And then, so then you began putting together, and when you realized that you needed to get like a 8-track recording studio and then the 16, what's the transition between the Moog and then the?
Well, I loved the Moog. It was a really good instrument. Bob Moog was a very interesting guy, really likable guy, and very human. And Moog synthesizers kind of reflected his humanity. They weren't perfect, but they were very soulful. And so I was very happy with that instrument, but I knew I couldn't take it on the road with Herbie. I mean, if you're in a huge rock group and you have one roadie that just handles your Moog synthesizer the way Emerson, Lake and Palmer had,
yeah,
then that's going to be fine. But there's 7 of us and one roadie, so that's not going to work. So I needed to find another synthesizer, and fortunately, just about that time, Alan Perlman came out with the ARP 2600, which is what I used with Herbie. Yeah, but really kind of a instrument that's about halfway between a preset and a full modular, but it was very flexible. You could do probably 90% of what you could do on a Moog, you could do on the little 2600.
Yeah, wow. And then so from there, how the studio came about? You got the 8-track, and then from.
Well, what happened was I ran into a guy who already had a Moog synthesizer, a small one.
Yeah.
And I said to him, look, I'll put in some money and we'll make this a full-size Moog, and then we can make some money doing local ads and whatever you know comes up. So we needed a place, and a young guy that was doing some jobs, sort of odd jobs for my friend, found this little, really kind of abandoned little warehouse in the Mission District, and which we were able to buy for $25,000. And by the way, the man who owns it now, 2 years ago, turned down $5 million. And then the same people came back and said, okay, we'll give you 8 million. And he said, no. So 25,000 to 8 million.
And it was a rundown place, right? Like a warehouse, right there.
It was it was a beautiful little building though. It was all redwood.
Yeah.
And at that time, if the redwood had a knot in it, they just tossed that away. So the whole building was built with absolutely prime quality redwood, and it turned out to be the perfect place for our studio.
And then you went to some sort of training to become like a sound engineer, or you kind of learn on the go?
No, it's the 60s, Claudio. Everybody, quote, does their own thing. You remember that phrase? Do your own thing. Well, everybody does their own thing, which means a lot of people in this country were running around doing stuff they had no idea what they were doing. And we were in that group because we knew nothing. I mean, you know, we knew what an average adult would know about recording, which is very little. That's all we really knew. So, but we just made it up as we went along. We made a lot of mistakes. the, the as a sort of smart aleck gesture, we put fur on the console. You know, the little board you lean on at the foot of the console. We covered that in fur. And one day when we started having customers, a guy who knew more than we did came in and he said, he rubs the fur. He said, that creates static electricity. He said, that's not really a good idea in a recording studio. So, I mean, we proceeded from a state of complete ignorance and just sort of made it up as we went along. But, you know, all the San Francisco rock groups, it was the same thing. I mean, 2 years ago, these guys didn't even play a guitar. Now they've got a contract with Warner Brothers. So
right.
it was like that, you know. And then I ran into a guy named John Stork, who was the studio designer for that era. He did Electric Ladyland, Jimi Hendrix studio in New York, many other studios. And I told him, I don't have any money. I can't. He told me what he charged. I think it was $100,000. And I said, he said, okay, I'll tell you what. He said, I'm going to be out in San Francisco in a few months. When I'm out there, I'll come over and I'll give you a little sketch and you can finish the studio from my sketch. Well, what happened was he came over. It's again, it's the 60s. We snort a little Coke together. We drink some red wine together and ended up spending 4 days designing my studio. So when he left, I had a John Stork studio, which was a big deal.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So and then, so what are the bands or names that end up being the first year
different fur
that you recorded, right? So
yeah,
they were big names, right? They were big names of the people that you guys record.
Oh my God!
Recorded the first 2 years to 3 years.
Stevie Wonder, Jefferson's Airplane. Let me pull up the list if I can find the list. No, yeah, I'll do it from memory. It will take too long. We had everybody. I mean, we had the biggest names in R&B and the biggest names in jazz. We had the biggest names in the movie business. I mean, we had Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah, I mean, we, yeah, there was a very, very successful studio. And I think the reason for the success was it was never really about, well, two things. First of all, it was never really about the money. So we were always very, very competitive. In fact, we really worried the established recording establishment. When I told them at an AES meeting, one of them asked me what I was going to charge. I said, oh, $25 an hour. And these guys were charging $100 an hour for an 8-track. We were going to do 16-track for $25 an hour. And the guy said, oh, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But so that we did that. And then the other things that brought people to us was, as I say, everybody that was at different fur that worked there was there because they loved music. And Susan Skaggs, who came on to be the studio manager, loved music. She loved musicians. She was a warm, mothering, but also very funny and hip person, and people liked being around her. So people would come and they would end up spending more time and therefore more money than they even intended, just because they liked being there. Francis Coppola, when he came over, he was there about 2 days, and he said, I'm kind of sleepy. He said, is there any place I can sleep? I said, well, my apartment is on the 3rd floor. So he would go, he started going up, he would come in, look at what we were doing for a while, and he'd go upstairs and take a nap in my in my apartment. So it was like that. It was very neighborly, I guess you'd say.
Wow.
Yeah.
What year we're talking about now?
Well, the studio went online in 1968. Mm-hmm. And by certainly by the time I came back from Herbie, which was in 1973, by that time the studio was running day and night. It really would run 20 hours a day, and then we'd have 4 days for cleaning and any audio repairs that needed to be made.
Yeah. So you were doing well financially. Somebody else was managing the studio, and then you were touring
Yeah.
with Herbie and so forth.
Mhm.
And then so great. I look at the list the other day, and big names were
Oh, yeah.
recorded there.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, people that I recognize,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
recognize well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, uh, one guy, I was actually, I think, a little surprised when he arrived because everybody was telling, oh no, if you're going to do synth work, you got to go to a different firm. So he'd imagined some big corporate establishment. So the Mission District at the time is kind of almost a ghetto. I mean, it's a lower working class neighborhood, and so the studio is not large. And I think he was kind of shocked when he got here and looked around. He wasn't sure this was going to work out, but it did.
And then eventually you end up selling the stuff, right?
Yeah, because
Why? Sorry from
because the very success of the studio meant that it was taking time and energy away from what I wanted to do.
which is record. Yeah, we play
I
music.
wanted to compose. I wanted to
yeah.
compose and make my own music. Well, I didn't make my own music. I made music for others still, but I was able to get into the film and television industry and work as a composer there. I did that for about 30 years. But I didn't want to spend energy dealing with I mean, running a studio is a very, very work intensive process because it's like any other business, but it's most businesses, you don't have to go in and recalibrate the whole system every day. And I mean, we had a single room, we had 10 employees to service that one room. So it's, and then there's a lot of overhead, and I just seemed like, no, this is not what I wanted to do. And I know Susan Skaggs, who was the studio manager, she told me when she came in, she had worked for David Rubinson, and she said, I'll come over to you and run your studio, but I want you to promise me something. If you ever decide to sell it, you'll give me a chance to buy it. So time came along, and I said, Susan, I really kind of want out. And I said, what can you do? She said, well, I don't have any money. I said, okay. So I sold her the studio for $850,000, I think, and nothing down. I said, I'll give you 10 years to pay it off. Just send me a check every month. They never missed a check, not in 10 years.
So 10,000, so 80 every year, right? For acre.
Yeah.
And well, you were. Well, I'm thinking about your dad, right? So kind of you did in a way what your dad did to you, right? So you helped somebody along the way that you knew that was responsible, manage your studio for 2 years or 5 years, and
sure. Yeah, sadly, Susan is gone. She got early onset Alzheimer's, so she's gone. But Howard Johnson, our head engineer, is still doing well and still recording. Yeah.
And then went from her to another guy that ended up buying it.
Yeah, there were two people afterward, or maybe even three, but two until we got to Patrick Brown, it didn't count. Nobody really understood, I would say, the spirit of that studio until we got to Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown bought it, I think, for $1.5 million.
They went from 800 to
yeah, and I think Susan and Howard sold it for $1.2 million. And then Patrick Brown got it. And Patrick Brown is not in it for the money. I mean, my God, if we're in it for the money and somebody offered you $8 million, you would grab it and get onto your retirement island and begin drinking Mai Tais. But he turned them down because they weren't really interested in the studio. By this time, what used to be a little Latin ghetto has become the most hip and fashionable district in San Francisco, property is extremely expensive and people are buying multi-million-dollar condos.
That's crazy how people can afford that stuff.
Oh my God.
I don't understand why.
Patrick, when I visited Patrick, we were talking about this, about how everything had escalated. He said, come here, I want to show you something. So we walked out onto the street. He said, see, pointed down to the corner. He said, see that building on the corner? I said, yeah. He said, okay, they've just sold the second floor apartment, a condo. And he said, they've sold it for $2.5 million and it doesn't even have a garage. You have to find a parking place on the street.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Crazy.
I don't understand that. Yeah. So the new guy is doing well, but it's making a good living. I mean, it's very good money that they.
Yeah, he's very good at what he does. And to me, he embodies the spirit because he's not really in it for the money. He's in it for the music. I mean, he wants to be successful. He's very ambitious, but he wants to be successful as a studio owner and as a producer. He's a very good producer.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that it's very expensive to produce a record, and the people, I don't know how much they charge you to put an album together or for the studio hours. It's not cheap. It's not $25 an hour.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
500 or whatever. So it's.
But I mean, Different Fur is one of the last surviving studios because what's happened is technology has made it more and more possible to do so. Musicians who are successful build their own studio in their house.
Like here, right? In the basement of my house, right? Yeah.
Right. So most of the big studios that were around in the 60s that we were competing with are all gone. Different Fur is one of the few that survives. Different Fur, and I think some successor to Wally Heider. Wally Heider had a studio that was also very successful.
Why do you think that he's still alive? Why he still think the business is still around? It's very well at what he does. He's very good at what he does.
Yeah. At a certain level, I think one accepts the fact that you can't do everything as well as it can be done. So you can make music full time, or you can be an engineer full time. You can't do both full time. So I think as musicians become more successful, they are more and more open and even want a really competent producer or engineer to come in and participate. I mean, the quad album that I'm doing his name is Cameron V, another, child of immigrant. His parents are Iranian. Cameron, as I say, developed all this quadraphonic expertise. So when it came time for us to do the album together, I said, Cameron, look, I'm going to send you the best stereo mix I can, and you turn it into a quad album, and I'll listen to it, and any changes I want, I'll make. I went down when I heard the first tune. I mean, it made me cry. It was so incredible. And he said, well, it's not finished yet. There's more to do. I said, well, you can do anything you want, but this does it for me. So I don't want to be my own quad producer and have to learn all the expertise, the new expertise it takes to do a quadraphonic album from an engineering standpoint. I'll do it from the musical standpoint, but I'm very happy to have a good engineer and producer there to do what I can't do as well as he can.
Yeah, I got you. I think the other big reason he didn't accept the $8 million because they knew that they are not interested in the music, right? They will buy the building, the warehouse, whatever. They will turn down and create condos.
That's it.
So that's the reason. So the money didn't mean anything. It would have been very different, like a person who commit yourself. No, I want to do music because whatever.
Yeah.
He would be talking to a person because $8 million.
He might do it or he might not. I mean, I don't know why the guy is so indifferent to money. I have a couple of friends. I hope I'm not revealing something too personal.
No. Don't say the name.
Well, I mean, it's not on my behalf. An old friend of mine is Lenny Pickett, who is the musical director for Saturday Night Live. Lenny is completely uninterested in money. I mean, I don't know how much the guy makes a week. 20,000 a week. I mean, you know, he's the musical director of Saturday Night Live. He's had this incredible career. He's recorded with David Bowie. He's recorded with what's his name from the Beatles? His name escapes me. But I mean, he's gone on the road with the biggest names, and now he's had this job for, gosh, 25 years. He's been the musical director of Saturday Night Live. The guy lives in the same apartment he lived in when he took the gig. He does not own a car. He takes he either takes the subway to work, or if he's got his musical instruments with him, he'll take a cab. He's not interested in money. I mean, I think often really good musicians are so totally engrossed in the process of making music that everything else is relatively unimportant. Family, yes, but beyond family, that's it. And Lenny is just not interested in money. I mean, it's funny.
Wow. So then, how long did it, after you put your in 1978 Beyond the Sun and the one in 1977, the Star Wars? What year are we talking about? What year you end up selling your studio?
Oh, just about that time.
75?
I think it was kind of a long, drawn out process because Susan she wanted it all in writing and made formal and so forth and so on. So she hired a lawyer to do that. The lawyer was one of these guys that could just nitpick over whether it should say which or that. You know, so it took to create the contract I think I moved into my new house in 81, and I don't think that the studio was finally sold until 83. I mean, I had just turned it over to them. Effectively, it was their studio, but it formally wasn't theirs until about 83.
Yeah. So before 83, so then you released the Beyond the Sun and Star Wars and then Rainbow Data, right? Or so, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? So what the transition between jazz and soundtrack and OST, how you end up doing that kind of electronic music, a little bit soundtrack?
Well,
how did it happen from jazz, for Herbie Hancock?
I really fell in love with synthesizers with Don Buchla's synthesizer, which I started using at Mills College in 1966 or 67. It was the very first analog synthesizer, I believe. It was even before Bob Moog's first instrument. So I'm very fascinated with electronic music and with electronic music making. Now, the reason I did Beyond the Sun, finally, I think, I so was in love with Wendy Carlos's music. I mean, she's just an amazing, unique musician, and switched on Bach. I don't think people much listen to it anymore. They ought to. It's funny.
I have the first and the second and the third. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's elegant. It's extremely musical, and I think I thought, oh, I'll do something like that. I feel, and Wendy liked it. In fact, she said people had always wanted her to do Holst's Planets, which is what that piece is based on. And she said, no, Pat has already done it. I don't need to do it. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and she wrote the liner notes for Beyond the Sun. So I think it was my love of Wendy's music. I wanted to do something like this. It's like Me Too. I feel finally, no, there actually was only one person who ever did that at a certain level, and that was Wendy. Everybody else, including me, that did it, we did it with varying degrees of success, but Wendy was the only person I think that really captured every possibility in that music. So that was something I was interested in doing. And I took one more crack at it when I got my first digital synthesizer, and I did Vivaldi, the Four Seasons. And I would say about that piece that, it's good. The digital synthesizer at that time had some limitations, and that was partly the reason. But basically, the reason it's not as good as I would like it to have been is that Wendy Carlos had already covered it. She'd done what needed to be done.
Yeah, wow. And we exchanged a couple email this week about Wendy Carlos and to be unreachable, but I want to create my mission to get a hold of her before it's too late. So wherever we'll talk,
Yeah.
when we stop the recording. But I need the same like you, right? I have great respect for Richard Bach and all the other stuff have done, and then I need to get a hold of her. So
Yeah.
if I need to send 20 mails, I will send 20 mails.
Good luck. Well, I mean, and she and I are the only ones of that generation left. Tomita's gone.
Yeah, exactly right. For me, Patrick, and I'm comfortable calling you Patrick and not Doctor.
Thank you.
This is my third online radio station. I'm going to creating, actually halfway done with my sort of electronic music. It's going to be electronic, a little bit of ambient music, and then the other half will be soundtrack. So I plan to put a nice email to Vanessa Van, some of the studio, and say, what can I do to play your music on my radio? Give me a discount, buying the CD from you,
Sure.
or the live, or whatever. And then I will be saying the same argument to Wendy, and I will say something like that. My radio, first of all, I'm paying everything. I'm paying for all the servers. I own the music. I'm paying rights to the musician.
Yeah.
I create the software. It's free. My radios are free. 24-hour day, no advertising, no social media, nothing. It's 90% is music, and the other 10% is interview with musicians like yourself and many others, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to have an ad from Coca-Cola. I'm not going to sell you anything.
Yeah.
It's great music. So that would be my argument. Why you being famous, not offer me like
See, in other words, you're one of us. You're another guy that cares more about music than money.
I'm a computer engineer, right? So I have my day job, right?
Yeah.
This is fun for me, right?
Yeah.
Because my dad put a Louis Armstrong record 78 p.m. when I was 3 days old, my living room, right?
Yeah.
And then my son is going to be the same down the road, right? So of course, I don't want to lose money, but I want to interview all these people. I need to close the gap, right? So
yeah.
I have interviewed people from Genesis, right? I want to, Peter Gabriel have not replied. I'm not too big for, Peter Gabriel only replied to BBC, but I start with kind of, I wouldn't call second tier, but the third tier. I'm in the second tier, and I want to keep on calling people,
Yeah.
Eventually, when I will tell Wendy Carlos, I have 3 radios that are free. I want to prescribe your music. I want to show the world how good your music is. Why not do an interview? I will post the interview in the website. People can benefit. That for the love of the music.
It's going to be a tough one, but good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant. I'm perseverant. I'm stubborn, consistent.
Good. Keep at it.
I gotta do it, man.
Yeah.
So then at the time, by the time 1980, Rainbow Days, you guys make any money out of there? They're selling CDs or selling vinyl at the time, right? We're vinyl, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. When I started making records,
yeah,
I did make money because, for one thing, the record companies would give you a very good advance, and so I think for Beyond the Sun, I think the advance was $35,000, which in 1978 or whatever that was, was pretty good money.
Pretty good money, yeah.
Yeah, and then I was also producing records at that time, So until I moved over to doing soundtracks, it was a good source of income. Now, you can give up unless you're Beyonce. You can just give up trying to make money from recordings because Spotify pays you, this much money. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The royalties on Spotify, I think 1,000 plays will give you maybe 6 cents.
Why?
Well, because they can. And I think
They shouldn't.
yeah.
They need competition. They need competition. They need to
Yeah.
be.
Well, yeah. So far the competition seems to be YouTube, and they're just as bad. I mean, YouTube has probably an hour and a half of my music. I have never even received a royalty statement. They just don't. Now, if you are making enough money or there's enough plays that it becomes possible to sue them, then you can sue them and then you'll get a royalty statement and they'll pay you. But otherwise, forget it.
So when somebody upload your music to YouTube is without your permission, is completely legal, right?
It's not. It's quasi legal. It's completely legal until you object. I had a situation with YouTube about 3 years ago. Must have been 4 or 5 years ago. I also had a kind of a little, I wouldn't call it a career, but more serious than a hobby. I did soundtracks for visual artists, avant-garde artists. And the guy I worked with the most was an artist by the name of Bruce Conner. Bruce was very successful, and his films with my soundtracks would be played at the Museum of Modern Art and that kind of stuff. So this young guy liked what we had done, and just out of naivete, there was nothing ill-intended. He thought, what I'll do is I'll keep Gleeson's music and make a completely new visual statement, but one that is exactly one-to-one related to every image in Bruce's film. So what he did was, for example, Bruce's film had, as it did, a short shot of a kind of big guy, almost like a giant, pedaling an extremely small tricycle. Then he would get the closest thing he could to that by surfing the internet, and he would replace Bruce's image with his own. I mean, why one would do that is even a question. But then pretty soon it's up on the internet. And I mean, the guy's not making any money from it, but it's a crappy representation of, it's associating my music with a bad film. So I wrote to YouTube, and it took me about a year to get them to take it down. It wasn't that easy to do. I had to show them that I had the copyright and so forth and so on.
That's very unfair. So, but let's say if I buy a CD of vinyl Rainbow Delta, and tonight I upload it to, so you won't make any money. I won't make any money either. So I'm making, because there's no.
Here's where you can make money. Here's
why
where
would I do it then? What would be the benefit for me uploading your music?
Well, look at I made soundtracks for 30 years in an era where the pay was just really cloudy. It was stupidly good. I mean, when I did Knots Landing, I was making $18,500 a week, plus for the first play, my royalties would be, performing rights royalties would be another $7,000. So I'm making over $25,000 a week. So I'm cool.
That's pretty good money, man.
It was good money. I'm cool. And my wife now is very successful at what she does. So if I never made a cent, we'd still be cool. So I'm not concerned about about making the money so much as I am concerned about what is it? I guess what I want to do now is perform live. Of course, for the time being, that's out of the question, but that you can still make money performing live. Not a lot. And when I played Moogfest, I think they paid me $2,500, which is not a lot of money.
When the last time you did that? When they do that every year, right? Year after year?
Yeah. As it turned out, I played at the very last Moogfest in 2019. That was the last one. I wasn't responsible, but it turned out they just chose not to go forward. They were losing too much money. Yeah.
Are those recordings still available somewhere?
Oh, that's another thing I did. I made 100, it was a solo performance. So I'm recording it as I'm performing it. I put out 100 CDs, a limited edition, numbered and signed. They're $100 each. So, you know, I've sold, I think, 51 so far. So, you know, that's something. But the wonderful thing about that is that the fact that people made that commitment made them emotionally closer to me. And a lot of those persons I correspond with all the time. You know, I mean, it's interesting because they made the commitment to spend $100. I think they like the music better and they're more interested in me. And so some of these things have turned into friendships, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And then so you begin putting this soundtrack, electronic music, and then studios, and then other producers, movie people, you know, advertising company call you, hey, can you try this? I need 30-second music for Coca-Cola advertising or
Right.
wine or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you begin making your name for yourself. And that kind of
Yeah.
Well, pretty good, man. And then in '82 came the plague, right? And then the computer, the Vivaldi, the fourth season. That's the Varese Band. How is it to work with Varese Band? It's difficult to get into that kind of label, Varese Band.
Oh, no, they came to me actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the way that worked was they needed, for some product that they were producing, they needed some synthesized thunder and lightning. And they came over to my studio and I did that for them. And then they said, well, you know, you should do an electronic record for us, even though they were a film label. I mean, that's what they specialized in. But then they paid me to produce the Four Seasons. Yeah.
So in kind of soundtrack world, Varese Band is the place to go to. I mean, there's still a lot of people that buy. Man, and it's too bad that Christian is not here because he knows a lot of Varese Band and he owns a lot of Varese Band. Why is there some great music in some good electronic music, good soundtrack are never released? Why is the case? In the 80s, there were a lot of, Christian will mention 100 names. What about this was never produced? That one never produced. That one never produced. Why some are put out and some of them are not?
Well, there has to be, a businessman, and it's going to be a small businessman because Varese Band is not a big institution. And the company that's re-releasing all of my records now is just one guy and a couple of assistants. So, somebody has to want to take a chance. So it's very subjective. It just depends upon there being somebody that wants to take a chance on doing this. And I don't know. I told the guy, his name is Ford Thaxton, that's got this little Soundtracks Music, that's this little label that's re-releasing all of my records. I said, Ford, how are you going to break even on this? I said, I know what my sales have been, on Slide. my sales on slide are like about $1,000 a year. So um, I said, how are you going to break even? He said, don't worry about it. So he's not worried about it. I'm not worried about it, but it's a kind of a system that is not exactly merit. It requires somebody that's got a little label and is willing to take a chance on your music.
So he bought the rights to put out all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's his business, whatever he does with that.
Yeah,
Where he breaks even or become a millionaire, he loses all his.
Well, I told him, I said, look, man, for the first couple of years, you don't need to pay me any royalties at all, because he's doing them not just with online, but he's actually releasing CDs. And of course, just making a CD, making 500 copies of a CD is going to cost several $1,000s.
Really, that much? That much?
Well, think about it. You got the art design. Somebody's got to design the cover. You got the printing of the artwork. You've got the mastering has to be done by somebody. A lot of these were originally released as vinyl, so now they have to take the vinyl and make that into a decent digital copy, which requires a lot of work and a lot of time. He's got a guy who's really good at it, but he's got to pay that guy. No, I think it's to produce a commercial product, even 500 copies, it's going to cost a minimum of $2,500. So the guy has spent, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 on my music. So I told him, first 2 or 3 years, we'll see how the sales go. First 2 or 3 years, you got it. I'm not collecting any royalties. And then when the time comes, then at that time we'll sign a new contract.
Yeah. How's he doing?
Seems to be doing extremely well. I noticed that the Star Wars album is for sale in Walmart. So we'll see how it goes.
How many soundtracks have you made?
Pardon?
How many soundtracks have you made?
Oh, soundtracks. Oh, I don't know. I couldn't even say, because when I was doing that, I would usually have at least one, sometimes 2 series. And then I would do movies of the week. And then when the television season was over, which used to be over by April, so between April and September, you were unemployed, then I would do feature films. So I don't know how many I've done. I've done 10 10 major NBC, CBS, and so forth series, 10 series. And I don't know how many movies of the week. And I haven't done a lot of soundtracks for features. I've probably done 20, of which like probably 17 are not worth listening to or watching. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to get a hold of everyone and listen to stuff, and some stuff on the next radio that I put together. I want to show the music, man.
Well, I'll send you some stuff.
And that's gotta be great stuff. What's the name of who's the name of the guy who the record company?
His name is Ford Thaxton. And I'm just afraid to touch the screen. Let me.
You, later on, you can send me an email with all the info. Don't worry.
Okay, yeah. Ford, it's sound. I think it's called Soundtracks Records. I think TRAX. I'll send you the.
Yeah, will be great. Okay. So then you went from the Vivaldi to what's called Driving While with Bernie.
Yeah, with Benny Maupin, who one of the great jazz musicians in the country. Yeah, that's a great album.
And so you went sort of, as you were doing electronic music soundtrack, you missed jazz. So you went back to jazz when you did jazz. Man, I miss the other stuff, so I need to do a little bit.
Well, it's jazz. The stuff I'm doing is halfway between jazz and electronic music. You know, it's kind of a combination of the two things.
Mm. Do you know? What electronic music people do you like? Do you know who Tangerine Dream is? Klaus Schulze.
Who?
Tangerine Dream.
Oh yeah. In fact,
Klaus Schulze.
I almost joined Tangerine Dream.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
Edgar Froese. You know all these people?
Huh?
Edgar Froese and then Klaus Schulze.
Well, that Edgar Froese was the problem.
My God, man.
Yeah. So I can't remember the man's name, but another guy in the group, one of the original members, worked with me on an album for Michael Honig, who was also wonderful musician. So he and I got along really well. So he invited me to join Tangerine Dream. I hadn't decided whether this was going to be a good thing for me to do or not. But what happened was, when this guy came back and told Edgar what he had done, Edgar was a control freak and not perhaps the nicest person in the world. He, quote, fired the guy that had invited me. It took him 2 weeks he kind of had to say, okay, I'm sorry I did this, and so forth and so on. So that was the end of to get back into the group, he had to give up on having me in the group. And Edgar told him, he said, I would never have anybody in the group that didn't speak German. Now, as it turned out, I one time actually spoke a little German, but I mean, it wouldn't have been enough to please Edgar.
Well, nowadays it's not true, because we interviewed one guy from Tangerine Dream, and the lady who played violin, she's Japanese. So the rule, when he passed away, kind of changed.
Yeah.
And Michael, what's the name of the famous album for Michael Honig?
Oh, Journey from the Northern Wasteland. Journey from the Northern Wasteland.
Oh man, that's.
Oh, thank you. I worked on that album. Yeah. In fact, we finished it at
really.
Yeah, we finished it at different Fur.
My God, that's a beautiful album, man.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Very, very well. The last, I think there are.
Oh, and in fact, you should do. I'm going to write, Michael. You should do. I'll give you his information.
Yeah. I wanna. Of course, I wanna interview you. Let me tell you, who's the name of the stuff? Hold on. The person who Tangerine Dream, I interview. Give me 1 minute. Let me check on my computer here, because the name is always difficult for me to pronounce. I interview Thorsten Quishing. So remember that Tangerine Dream have changed a lot in the last.
Yeah. Well, sure.
Last 5 years, and now there's 4 guys: Ulrich, the Japanese lady, and then Thorsten and another person. Yeah. But then they change every 3 years. They, one person leave, another enter, and so. Yeah. Tangerine Dream have been 100 different people, right? So
exactly.
Definitely, I want to interview him. It's difficult to get a hold of Klaus Schulze.
I don't know. He's a friend of Michael Shreve, who is the drummer in my trio. So I can ask him. I'll ask him. Let me write that down so I don't forget.
Yeah.
So
definitely Michael Honig, and then.
And Michael Shreve is another guy you should interview. He was the drummer in Santana.
Man, yeah, put the name on it. I want to talk to everybody.
Okay.
Do you know about, we interview, believe it or not, we began with my friend Christian. It's too bad that he's not here, because he knows a lot of music, and some Italian progressive band. And we end up interviewing people from, quite sure you know the name, but PFM. And then the latest one that we did, hold on, let me look at. Of course, I don't know if you know of Klaus, of course, the German guys, love that. You know who the band Popol Vuh?
I don't.
They did a lot of. You know what Werner Herzog is, right? A German director.
Who?
Werner Herzog.
Bernard
I
Herzog.
I will send you the link, right?
Okay.
So several of these folks that were in Popol Vuh, the main person died, and they went to another band, kind of electronic called Amol Duel too. And then he's the guy who knows Klaus Schulze. But Klaus
Yeah.
Schulze,
I,
I
I
heard
think
that.
I think Michael Shreve can put you in touch with Klaus.
Oh, that
I
would
don't
be
know.
great.
I'll find out.
Yeah, and
Oh, and you know, Klaus was in the same band that I was in, except not at the same time. Klaus was in Go. You know Go?
of course I know that.
Okay, okay. Well, he was in the original Go, and I was in Go too.
My God, man. What a life you have, man.
I have been very, very lucky. I'm going to tell you a little story which explains a
It's
lot
not,
about
Patrick.
music.
It's no luck. It's no luck. It's no luck. I mean,
Well,
you know what I
no,
was thinking? When you give up playing music for 15 years, your teacher, your piano teacher, she's a bad person.
yeah,
Because you didn't do anything for 15 years. And if you have stuck with that, right? With your jazz and keyboard music, in those 15 years you went to academia that you didn't like it, man, you could have done, you have done well, but you can do have done.
I have. But
No
look,
luck,
I
right?
want to tell you this story. So there was a young guy I used for television sessions. He was a trumpet player, very
Yeah.
good. And he was at the time, his money gig was he was working for John Williams out at the ranch, Star Wars Ranch. What is his name? You know, the big recording facility that's owned by the guy that did Star Wars. I can't think of the name. Anyway,
Lucas?
he's working. Lucas Ranch. So he's working for John Williams, and John Williams seems like a very formal and sort of formidable guy. And actually, he's very kind of funny and friendly. And so my friend is standing listening to playbacks with Williams, and he says, but at the time, my friend had never written a soundtrack. So he says to John Williams, he says, Johnny, I want to ask you a personal question. Can I do that? And Williams says, well, it depends upon the question. We won't know until you ask. So he kind of teased him. So my friend says, well, I'd like to do what you're doing someday. And how can I do that? So Williams, he's kind of half joking and half serious. He kind of strokes his chin and he says, you know, the first thing is you need to have a few good breaks. And he stops and he says, about 30 of them.
30 breaks, right?
And so what's happened to me and to my friend, who, by the way, now has 2 Emmys, is that you need, you know, a lot of good breaks. And another thing you need, which I've been very, very fortunate, is you need some amazing mentors, people that know so much more than you know and that are willing to share it with you. And I've had Gil Evans. Gil Evans, I met him almost just by accident in New York, and he became a mentor. I mean, he went to Herbie's gigs at the Village Vanguard, and he recorded what we had done there. And then he'd have me over to his house the next day, and we'd listen to the soundtracks together. I mean, to the cassettes together. And he'd stop the cassette and he said, "No, what's going on there?" I mean, he just took me under his wing. I've had, you know, as a mentor, I've had Herbie Hancock. I've had Gil Evans. I mean, if you can't make it after having those guys as mentors,
you know what to make.
Yeah. So I've just been very lucky. I've had the good breaks. I was in San Francisco, which was a really hotbed of the new music, the music of the 60s. So I was there for that, which got me in with, a lot of famous rock groups and so forth. Wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, but it was useful, and I made a little money and I learned something. So I've just been very lucky. I would have to maintain that a lot of it is luck. If you don't have the luck, if you're not lucky, it doesn't really matter how good you are.
Because if God exists, then why some people will be luckier than others?
Yeah.
Or have more breaks than others?
Well, of course, you got to put yourself out there.
Well, you need to be good, obviously, right?
You need to be good, and you need to put yourself out there. I have a friend, he's gone now, was probably one of the most amazing writers, composers, arrangers of the 20th century. He only did one movie. Oh, we're going to end here.
It says 10 minutes. Oh,
yeah. Man. So we better wrap it up. So anyway, what I was going to say is that, but he was a guy who was very introverted, very anxious. Well, if you go into the Hollywood film community and you're introverted, don't make friends easily, and you're anxious, it really doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah.
So that's the deal. Well, this has been fun.
Man, if possible, if you have the time to do like so many questions, I want to ask you to do like a part 2 and a part 3. And
yeah, we'll have Charmaine set up the meeting.
Yeah, because there's so many. But in the meantime, Patrick, if you can set me up with those people,
I will.
Send me an email with the people that is selling your music, because definitely I want to get.
We'll do that too.
And then, do you two last questions? Do you are in touch with the Varese Lavan folks that got the management?
I don't even know. I haven't talked to them in 25 years.
Yeah. Right. And then, yeah, Wendy Carlos, my mission. Will you send me an email and then
good luck with that. Good luck.
I will, but send me an email how to get a hold of her. Knowing this recording, obviously, but I will. It's going to be my life mission. I need to,
Yeah, as I've told you, I think she's just retreated from the world. But who knows? You may be the guy.
I'm an outside person, right? Yeah. I mean, good. I want to do an interview. I want to show her music. I think I'm doing the right thing, right? So
you are.
Maybe we'll say, I don't care what the reason you gave me. No, it's no, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. And let's have another talk. And meanwhile, I'll send you these names and email addresses.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
It's been excellent, and you are humble, and man, I didn't know that you were a very famous guy. I know you were famous, but there is a lot more to the story that I was able to grab from the internet and sources and stuff. Yeah. It was a real pleasure, Dr. Patrick Gleeson.
And good luck with these stations.
Yeah. I will. Yeah, I will send you a link with the. I don't know if I send you a link with where I have all the